Okay, it's time to split the transmission and do a visual inspection just to make sure that putting it back in the car is a good idea. To that end, I'm going to clean it up because splitting the transmission at this point, I don't want any of this grime and grunge to end up in the gears. So what I will do is I'm going to release the plate here. So this is no longer in the way, and I'm going to cover up the axle seals so they don't take a lot of abuse from the pressure washer. And the first thing I'm going to do is just start hitting it with some degreaser to sort of knock this loose. So let's get started. Just going to be using some engine degreaser for this process. The worst part is inside the bell housing. Just general grunge. I don't see anything concerning in here. Looks like the rear main seal is actually still holding, but I'm going to replace it. Not a concourse job, but plenty clean enough for our purposes. So at this point, I'm going to put it on a relatively flat surface and start removing the bolts. Okay, the bolts, I believe all of them on the splitting the case is an E12. So there are some that are underneath. There are 3 along this edge that are on the bottom. So I'll probably take those off first. Let's see, I believe that's it. The rest are accessible from the top. So I'll start on the bottom here. And these are a little bit harder to access, so okay, when you're doing this, always make sure to check the bolts, and if any are different length, make a note as to where they go so you can put it back together without any problems. Okay, now it should just be a matter of removing the bolts all around the top. So let's see if we have the same bolt length, and we do. So that's good news. So we'll just continue around until we find anything different. Okay, to start splitting the case, you'll notice that they helpfully left a couple areas where you can get a pry tool in between the two halves and pry. And you can use a variety of pry tools. I've just brought the ones that were easily at hand. You can see there's a lot of different ways to skin this particular cat. I don't think it's going to take a huge amount of pressure to get this thing off. So I'm going to just start prying on these spots, and actually I can see already that the case is, if you look closely, whoops, sorry, the case is actually already splitting, so that couldn't have been much easier. So basically I'm just going to use 2 tools here and just start working it up a little bit, and there should be another spot over here where I can work on this side. And now that this is loose enough, I'm going to put this under here just to brace it, to keep it from being so wobbly, and carefully lift off the top cover. And there we go. We now have access to the internals of our mini transmission. All right, and I'm liking what I'm seeing here, folks. Everything feels so far really, really nice. By the way, this is basically the differential here. This is an open differential, which is on the low performance models. This would be the point where you would pull this out and replace it with a limited slip differential if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about that. What I want to do here is a couple things. One, I'm going to pull the magnet out. Now you see, this is all of the debris that has been attracted to this magnet, which is in the sump and the bottom part of the transmission for its entire life, most likely. And that is just not a whole lot of stuff to have built up in the course of 160,000 miles or whatever. So that makes me very happy. More importantly, I don't see chunks. I don't see shiny bits. I don't see pieces of gears. So I'm thinking this transmission's probably in great shape. I'm going to clean this off and reinsert it, and then start looking deeper. That's cleaned up, so now it's ready to slide back into its slot. Go ahead and I'll put it in. So that's good. So now the trick is, I'm going to put the transmission through its shifter. You can shift to any gear you want from out here, and I'm just going to slowly rotate it. And I'm doing this with my fingertips, folks. This is how hard it is to turn this transmission. It's a little harder to turn once the case is put together, because it actually compresses, it pushes down, it preloads these bearings to the point where they have a little more rotational drag. But the trick here is, I'm just looking very closely for any gear that doesn't look absolutely perfect, that's got any chunk missing, that's got a tooth missing, anything that would impede the forward progress of the car, or the rearward progress for that matter. And I'm not seeing anything. So now I'm going to shift it to another gear, and I'm going to continue to turn it, just looking for anything at all that's out of line. Okay, let's shift it again. And again, we're looking good here. There's nothing here that is scaring me in the least. Okay, so now I'm going to shift it again into, I'm going to go to another range by pulling the shifter out and moving it up and down. Now I'm pushing the shifter in. I'm pushing this lever in toward the body, and I've got 3 more gears, and it kind of takes 2 hands to do this, folks. Okay, so I'll push it in, shift it to the bottom position, and check again. Make sure there's no obstructions. Okay, go up 1 position. Whoops. All right, check it. Another condition. It's looking good, feeling perfect. All right. And all right, to get in reverse, you pull this gear shift linkage out away from the case. You rotate the lever up from this perspective anyway, which pushes this pawl down. And what was happening was, without the case, there's nothing to guide this particular thing straight down, and it's got to go straight down to engage reverse. And so it was a little hard to do without holding that in place separately. But now we're just, that will reverse the gears and the direction. So once again, we have good rotation. no problems with the gears, and we're actually ready to start putting this thing back together. We've done about everything we can do. All right, just wipe down around the edges of the case. There is no sealant on it. That tells me this has probably never been a part of before. The other thing to check is the condition of these bearings, these roller bearings, for the input shaft, and also just look at the inside of the seals for the axles. And this is one that there's a bearing inside on one of the intermediate shafts that rides on this. This is the thing that we had to use our fingers to replicate to get reversed, by the way. That little knob sits in there, rides in there, and that ensures that it goes up and down directly. So similarly with this, the shaft ends up in there. Anyway, it's time to go get the sealant. You need to use a special RTV sealant. You need one that's specially designed to withstand gear oil. So, of course, I've got a tube of that. Okay, so this is the stuff you need. Gear oil gasket maker, Primitex. It's basically an RTV specifically for, and you can see, differentials, but obviously also manual gear boxes because they use the same type of fluid. So now that we have that, just a matter of opening the tube using the handy opener that's included in the lid. I have cut the nozzle off at the first major intersection so that I think I'll have about the right size bead. Okay, and now I just push it through and start getting a bead out this side. All right. And the next step is you want to run the bead, you want to run a decent sized bead around the inside of the screws. I've seen people run on the outside, and the problem with that is if there's a gap anywhere, the fluid will get around the unsealed section and run down the screw and out. So you don't really want that to happen. I'm going to open this up just a little bit more to make it a little easier to dispense and to get a little thicker bead. But it doesn't take much. You don't really have to do a huge bead to get a good seal here, because these two surfaces were tight enough before without any sealant to actually work. So just a little thin couple millimeter bead is all you need around the inside. Look for any areas where it might be a little bit thin. Touch it up as necessary. And with this particular, you have to read the directions because different RTVs are a little different. But this one asks you to push the, put the two halves back together immediately once you've dispensed it. So that is what I'm going to do, folks. Okay, here we go. And try to place it carefully straight down. And there are the posts that actually serve as the locator tabs that will align the two halves perfectly as you put it together. And pause it. Give it some love taps with my dead blow hammer to start getting the two sections to mate. Okay, and it starts sounding like that when you're getting it right. Don't use a regular hammer on these surfaces because that could mar them and it could cause a leak, and nobody wants a leak. Okay, the next section is to replace all of these bolts back in the transmission and get them finger tight only. So I'm going to do that. It's not going to be exciting, so I'm going to let you go get a cup of coffee while we pause the video.
Okay.
Okay, now, next step, I'm going to just run these down. Just using this to, and just like I said, finger tight. I'll finish the rotation. Okay, just finger tight. And I'm going to start on the other side now, just to try to balance it out a little bit. I'm holding the tool very loosely so it can provide no torque at all. Okay, check them all, and they're not quite finger tight, folks. I did that right. So now just a matter, whoops, this one. That one is. Okay, so just make sure they're all finger tight. And you can see if we've done it correctly, if you look closely, you'll actually see a tiny bit of the RTV coming out between the two sections, which I'm seeing. If you look here, you can see a nice little bead being squished out. That's what you want to see. Now, the trick is we just wait an hour, and then we'll run these all down to the proper torque. And since, like any time you remove the transmission, you really want to do a clutch job, I've got a new clutch, so I've also got a new throwout bearing that goes with the new clutch, because you never ever put in the old one if you've gone to the trouble of taking the transmission out. So now it's just a matter of putting this back together. It's a very simple process. It's just a push, play and push kind of arrangement. Okay, so the bearing goes on the top side, and you see these two little clips here. That's what actually holds it in place on these two little tabs. So it's really just a matter of lining it up and pushing it home. That's all there is to it. Now our throwout bearing is installed. Lights on. Okay, the clutch kit does come with a special grease. I'm going to use a special grease, because why wouldn't you use a special grease? And the thing is, I'm going to use a little dab of it on this pivot point for the, let's see, did I get it open? There it is. Okay, just a little bit on this. Okay, and this gets installed in here on this, and it should be kind of hard to push in, not extremely difficult. All right, I'm also going to put a little bit of grease on the shaft that the throwout bearing rides on. So it doesn't take a lot of this, folks. It's really just microns of the stuff that get the job done. So don't go crazy. You don't have to have globs of grease all over everything. This just keeps everything happy. All right, and so now we need to install the spring clip on this end here, and you see the clip itself will go through here. This will split to allow the little ball pivot joint in there to fit through. And once that's through, you can push both of the spring clips down, which it's now seated there, and I should be able to push the tips of the spring clips up into position and where it's locked, and at that point you should be able to easily move this up and down, and it's pivoting on this little nub here, and it won't release. So okay, we're good to install as soon as we, of course, wait for this sealant to dry and torque it down. Okay, now the case gets torqued down to 27 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't a whole lot, but you do want to make it right, and you want it to be very consistent all the way around the periphery to make sure it's sealed down and squished down properly. So notice that the socket I'm using, the E12 socket, is a 3/8 inch drive, and unfortunately, the torque wrenches I have to work with are 1/4 inch drive and 1/2 inch. So obviously, I'm going to need a 1/2 inch to 3/8 inch drive to turn the socket. And for the 1/4 inch drive, I'm going to use this. The reason I'm using a 1/4 inch drive is because I'm going to pre-tighten everything. I'm going to go around once, tighten it to about 10 foot-pounds, and this smaller torque wrench will give me much more positive reaction at that point to make sure I get it consistent. And then I'm going to do a second stage where I tighten them all down to 27 foot-pounds. I've got them both preset and ready to go, so now just wait for the sealant to age an hour, and we're on it. Okay, so I'm going to start off, I'm going to do kind of a modified star pattern where I'm just going to go from side to side and take it down to my 10 foot-pounds using my extension and my torque wrench. Now 10 foot-pounds isn't much, that's all it is, and I'm just going to go around incrementally and have to keep the case from moving. Okay, and kind of get some of the corners. Okay, now we're getting more sealant squished out, like over here. If you can see, we got more sealant coming out because we're putting more pressure on it. So that's exactly what we should be seeing at this point. And again, you can see as I'm tightening this one, the sealant is leaking out the side just a little bit. Okay, so now I've got enough of them tightened where it's pretty good. I'm going to just go ahead and start tightening all of them just sequentially now, because I've got the case pretty well centered, so I won't make you watch the whole thing. Go to the big guy. I'm going to do 27 foot-pounds, which is going to take a little more bracing. Again, not a huge amount of torque, so if you don't hear it click, stop before you break something and check your equipment. Okay, now I'm just going to go around and tighten them all down. I've got them tight enough to start. Okay, and the thing to notice is that we've got a nice consistent bead of sealant pretty much around the entire circumference, showing that we have indeed sealed the case and got it torqued down square and properly. So that's what you want to see, folks.